Hello, nerds for Yang.
Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds! So nerds!
Hello, nerds!
Hello,
Now with this campaign, bang, dang, it's and Drew, come roll with the Yang Gang.
Hello, nerds.
Hello, nerds!
Welcome to the show, Heidi from Vets for Yang. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you, Tom?
I'm fantastic. It's so fun seeing people that I've sort of been following and observing on Twitter. It feels like over these years, but it's only been many months since we were all campaigning and pushing for Andrew. How are you holding up in this post Yang 2020 world?
I mean, I'm probably doing about as well as can be expected. I feel like you said, it was forever ago, but it was literally still this year, that Andrew was still running. And I also feel like had he stayed in the race even a few more weeks,
I know.
do you feel like that things might be different right now?
I think for sure he would have been a really strong VP contender.
Yes.
And maybe he would have caught lightning in a bottle, but who would have known that we would be in a, major recession and global pandemic? Because obviously when he dropped out, there wasn't really much going on in the world. The world was kind of stable, relative to today. But yeah, coulda, shoulda, woulda, right? Like he made the best decision he could with the data he had, and he's landed in a great place. I think he's way more prominent now, and the humanity forward stuff seems to be really, he's been able to kind of lean into that. So, I mean, when you think about the other candidates that suspended, they just sort of disappeared, whereas our guy has almost risen in prominence.
Well, if you think about it, none of them even ran on a platform, right? They ran on, I want to be president. This is the next step on my resume. They ran on themselves, right? Andrew was never, his campaign was never about Andrew wants to be president, right? It was about these ideas that he had and a sense of urgency that, these problems are on the forefront. We need to fix them. But if you think about any other candidate, what was their campaign other than I think I should be president?
Yeah. No, I agree. I wish the great folks in Iowa and New Hampshire felt similarly. Now, I mean, you were full time on the campaign, right?
Yes, I was in Iowa.
Yeah. So you do tell. What was that like on the, on the, I want to say behind enemy lines. Obviously, we love the Iowans. But what was it like, inside the campaign on the ground?
Okay, so the Iowa Yang Gang is awesome. Andrew's supporters in Iowa were amazing. To me, I think that one of the major problems was that Andrew they didn't get their third quarter money till after all of these other campaigns were already well established and really had their ground game going. But we, all of a sudden it was oh shit, we have money. We can seriously make a play. But at that point, literally, I will tell you as someone that was in Iowa, by the time Andrew started running ads on TV, people were already tuning the ads out, right? Because they're they were already oversaturated with constantly Biden and Bernie, and I'm just going to be honest. I don't think that the company that the Yang 2020 hired to make the ads did anything that would set him apart. Like I just felt like James Treacle was making better ads for the Yang campaign than this company we were paying millions of dollars to were. And I mean, there's a lot of reasons that Iowa failed, but a big part of it to me was that we just got our start so late. And it sucks that Iowa has to be where they had to make their play, right? But they were Andrew wasn't like other candidates that either they really weren't serious like at all, or they had a lot of money to keep playing, right? They had to make their case and make their stand in Iowa, and unfortunately it didn't work,
Yeah, I mean, when you were observing the campaigns on the ground, obviously, we're all Yang Gang here. What other campaigns did you think were doing, like kind of executing really well and well managed and well executing and like getting it done? Were there any that impressed you?
Yeah, well, the two winners, Bernie and Pete, had very, very strong ground games. Like Bernie, it took him, 5 years. And by the time Iowa had voted, Bernie had basically been running for 5 years. He had spent $90 million by the time Iowa voted. They had, his volunteers had made 5 million calls into Iowa, and they had knocked on 500,000 doors, right? And then they still couldn't win. That just shows you like the hurdles a progressive has to overcome. So when you think about it like in those terms, like Bernie with he at that point had a huge political machine behind him, right? Money, volunteers, they were relentless, and they still did not take Iowa like they thought they were going to. But the fact is, Pete had money and a good ground game, even though he was a relative newcomer. And he also had the advantage of being a Midwesterner. He and Amy, Amy was considered, a lot of Iowans considered Amy like their adopted senator. Like when you've got people like Steve King as your representative, you want to adopt, Amy Klobuchar, right? Yeah. So, and the thing is, a lot of people say, well, Bill Clinton didn't win Iowa and he still won the presidency. But the thing is, and he only got 2% in Iowa. But the reason is in 92, there was an Iowan running. And that's why he only got 2% in Iowa and then still won the nomination. If there is a local, Iowans, right. So literally they had two locals. They had Pete, essentially, he's a Midwesterner. And then they had Amy, Minnesota is, their neighbor. Yeah. So we were fighting against that. And like I said, when you see what Bernie put into Iowa to lose, it also kind of puts in perspective, Andrew and Bernie weren't necessarily in the same lane, but they were progressives. And the fact that, Andrew even did as well as he did, in total, is a testament, because, like I said, Bernie has this machine behind him now, and couldn't make it happen. He even had a bigger machine than Biden, right? Biden had no money. I never saw Biden supporters in Iowa. I never saw I saw a couple of offices. Even when you would see a Biden rally, there was 4 people there. I know one time we we were on the bus tour. We were in the same city as Jill Biden, right? She was going around and like they didn't even plan an event for her. They just had her show up at a like a Mexican restaurant and just talk to people. And like it was like 6 people, right? There was no strategy, there was no planning, and still Biden is the nominee. So you can it's hard to make sense of what went wrong. But if you look at it from the perspective of like Andrew went from your average person, like, hey, I'm gonna run for president, to top Democrat, he didn't fail. Right? It's monumental. And right now he's literally the most prescient person in the country because as he said, at one point I was a futurist. Like, remember when everybody thought I was a futurist? And he is like, they're like, oh shit. Yes, yeah. It's not future. When he was running, it was like, like I told him when he was on my live stream a couple weeks ago, I was like, you were like kind of like the happy doomsdayer. We're like, hey, we've still got time. You know, this stuff is in the future. It's really terrible shit, but we can course correct. We can fix it. And now it's just like, oh, well, you know, all of this stuff is here. You know, all it takes is a global pandemic to make the 5 or 10 years in the future now. So
when you had him on, what's your read on where his head's at and how's he's doing and what he's going to do next?
I wanted to ask him to unsuspend. That's not a very popular opinion in the Yang. It's my personal opinion. I want him to come back, but I understand that he's not going to come back. I feel like just talking to him. I mean, he's the same Andrew. Like. He's very much, he's by the data and by the numbers. And he's also very determined to keep the message alive. Like sometimes I feel bad for him. Like I'll see him like doing these 9 interviews in a day. And, you know, he's all over talking to everybody. And I'm over here like, gang, let's back him up. You know, he doesn't have to do this alone, but he's still very determined. He's identified more problems, you know, obviously we all have since he dropped out, but, you know, I really appreciate that he's still fighting. He's fighting as hard. Like, let me tell you something. I spent 17 days on a bus tour with Andrew, and I would take days off and because it was absolutely exhausting, and I would come back and there's Andrew still there. He can't take days off for the bus tour, right? He is the bus tour. Yeah. And he's like, even at one point I saw him once lose his train of thought while he was giving his stump speech. He stopped and everybody was like, oh shoot, is he okay? And it took him probably about, I don't know, it was like 10 seconds of silence. And then he launched back into his stump speech. That's the most I've seen him on that bus tour. Like, you know, I'm having to take whole days off because I can't, right? I'm done, right? And I see Lacey's in the chat. She can attest to that. Like, but Andrew was there every day doing this. We had events, he'd have 5 events a day, right? And the man he's not human, but he's still doing that, you know? And like you said, where is everyone else? Where's the other candidates? Are they still doing that?
Yeah, they're done.
They're done. No. What do they have to offer?
They're MIA, man. They're MIA. Yeah. What's a typical day like? What was a typical day like for you working on the campaign?
I mean, it was absolutely insane. The bus tour, or, you know, the 2 bus tours are probably still the most recent thing in my mind. But it was basically like they had Andrew's day planned to a T, right? Down to, in this 5-minute block, he's going to do a recording for like an animated TV series or something like that, right? and you had to follow, that. So I would start out probably in Northeast Iowa, and then at the end of the day, I'm like 6 hours away. It was, there were points where you're literally just reading and seeing where you have to be. Like at one time, I was introducing him in one town, and I'm like, we really appreciate you guys getting out here on a Monday afternoon. And then everybody's like, it's Tuesday. I'm like, today I learned it's Tuesday. Because you do kind of have to like just shut down a little bit to like preserve like just the ability to get the job done, right? You're just like, I have to go here, I have to go here, I have to go here. And then also, I should remember it's Tuesday and not Monday. The whole crowd was like, oh no, don't make it Monday again. I was like, I'm sorry.
Yeah. I can imagine it's like being in a hamster wheel. You're just constantly racing from 1 hour appointment to 1 hour appointment.
Yeah. So, and then a blur. I would have to either introduce like a local Dem chair that would introduce Andrew, or I would introduce Andrew. And then I would have to leave to get to the next event. Or if I had a little bit of time, I would stay and then help like Lacey as they're doing like the selfie cameras or whatever. But it was just, in January alone, I put 6,000 miles on my Yangmobile, driving all over.
On the Renegade.
Yes.
It's still holding up?
No.
Not so much. Not so much. Oh, man. Now, tell us the story about how you ended up working there, because I think I read that you were volunteering, and then it kind of happened pretty fast, right?
Well, I was, long story short, I was out of college for the semester because of some financial aid problems, and I had literally just discovered Andrew, and I was like, probably like, this was last summer, this was a year ago. Like a lot of people, I just immediately was like, holy crap, this guy he needs to be out there. Like, how can I help? I'm like, I live in South Dakota. What's the one thing? South Dakota votes last. Nobody cares about us. We have more cattle than humans, right? But what's the one thing that a South Dakotan can do is go to Iowa.
Proximity. I love it.
Yes. So there was another guy, Joe Citro, who had put these giant Yang 2020 decals on his vehicle. And I was like, that's what I'm going to do. So I literally went to the same guy that he went to, and he put the same decals on my Jeep. And then basically every other week, because I have my son every other week that I didn't have my son, I was in Iowa driving this Jeep. I was, I printed up my own literature, my own business cards. Like I would leave them at truck stops. I like at red lights, people would roll down their window and be like, who's Andrew Yang? So I'm like yelling at other cars in traffic in Iowa, just traveling the whole state, just like getting like his name out there, just getting like visibility, because most people I talked to, especially in those early days, August, September, had never heard of him. They had no clue who he was. And so I would do things like, and I'm not someone who, if anybody's read like the thing I wrote after Iowa, like with my PTSD, I'm not someone that can really talk to strangers. So this has all been like very like transformative for me. But it wasn't like I'm going up to people and introducing them to Andrew. Like I would be at a truck stop just kneeling, chalking Google Andrew Yang, a giant truck stop in Iowa. And then people would ask me, who's Andrew Yang? I'm like, Google him. I just wrote it. Or no, I wouldn't be so rude, but I found that like right now, if there's one thing I can talk about, it is this campaign, right? And these ideas. So whereas like normally I'm just like, please don't talk to me. I could go into my give like the Andrew Yang UBI, human-centered capitalism, whatever spiel, and people were always fascinated. And one of the things I think that what I would often come across is people would think like, this is a great idea, but it's not feasible, right? Something that we didn't really do well. And that's why I was saying like the ads, I didn't really like the ads that we created. If you got people past the hurdle of how you can do it, they were on board, right? We literally would never explain to people like how a value-added tax worked. Because like, I feel like we left a lot of people feeling like it was pie in the sky. They're like, oh, this is great, you know, but also like, you know, like a lot of things politicians promise, we can't do that. And so, but if you explained it to them, if you show them the math, they're like, oh shit, you know, and then they're yang gang. And I feel like that was a huge problem for us, was our ads didn't do it. Like even our literature didn't really, like, we had to be able to explain it and explain it rather quickly and simply. Right. And we never, and that was one thing, was like, we never made that, So
yeah, the ads I remember were more about maybe humanizing him, showing him as a family guy.
Yes.
That kind of thing.
Yeah, and I understand that, you know, but Andrew, the reason he even got to where he was by being outside of the box. They were trying to run a traditional campaign. Like I said, they got the money, and then all of a sudden they're like, okay, let's be serious, right? Let's run a serious operation. But then that kind of took away from what made him, you know, what got all of us on board. And that also just kind of made him forgettable, you know? You know, so...
Yeah, it's I think maybe there was probably a feeling like he needed to cross over to become more mainstream, to appeal to a broader group. But maybe that took away some of, you know, kind of the uniqueness about him. Because actually, when you put it that way, like those ads, they could have been a Pete Buttigieg ad, or they could have been a Cory Booker ad.
Yes.
They weren't uniquely a Yang ad.
They were very, very standard, like safe. They were very safe. And like I said, at that point, when they were in the circulation, when they got put into the circulation with all the other ads, it was easy to, like, I would know when an Andrew Yang ad came on. I would pipe up, but I had tuned out every other ad. So if you weren't a Yang supporter, you were tuning that one out too, you know?
Yeah. Actually, Soldier has a question. Do you think the commercials, clearly it sounds like you think the creative direction of the commercials weren't great. Do you think just the act of buying the ads time was a good use of resources, or do you think we should have tried something completely different?
They had to do it. Like it increased the name ID. So before we were running these ads, nobody had heard of them. So yes, people had heard of them after those ads. They were, you know, like, for what they were supposed to do, they did increase, like, his, you know, that people knew who he was and that he was running, but they just weren't compelling ads that really set him apart. Like I said, they were just easily absorbed into the fray of all the other, because, like, seriously, in Iowa, like, when it was a commercial break, it launched right into Bernie ad, Biden ad, Amy ad, Pete ad, sometimes a Yang ad, and it's people tune that out, you know, like, I mean, they'll absorb that, okay, Andrew Yang's in the race now, but they didn't do anything to, like, differentiate him from any of the other candidates. Like I said, James Striegel was making way more compelling ads than, you know, this company. And James made an ad for our veterans group. Like, one of the things that people were looking for, or what they're always looking for, is, can someone be a commander in chief, right? They want to know that you can command the armed forces. And we never made that case either. But the ad that James made for us, like, and I went to James and I was like, look, I want to, like, Andrew has these amazing leadership qualities, right? I want to do an ad where literally it's just veterans naming off his leadership qualities, right? And we had, I don't know if you guys have seen like the video with me and Dr. Russell Toll, where Russ gives like this really compelling speech. Like we had for Yang, we had clips of that. We had like, I said that I'm looking for a leader with integrity. And then we had Richard Porter. And in this ad, Richard is like naming off the various qualities of a leader, like slowly. And as he did it, you show Andrew, there's clips of Andrew in different scenarios where he's embodying those leadership qualities. And I begged the campaign, I'm like, please put these on the air. Like, this is important to Iowans. It's also important to people in New Hampshire. Like, please, but they didn't. They stuck with, it was like even just buy Facebook ads with it. This is a really good ad. This will work. I'm telling you, I live here. This will work. And they didn't, They stuck with their consultant.
Yeah. I guess it's like one of those football games where you wonder if you ran a different play, what would happen?
I know during the campaign, I was very much pushing this. I was like, do this. And I told Andrew himself. I said,
what did he say?
I said, look, I don't know if you have a contract with them that you can only run their ads. He's like, no, I can do whatever I want. But they just never did. Like, and it's not even like Andrew is not even the person to ask. Andrew is literally going from event to event, interview to interview, campaign stuff to campaign stuff. Andrew's not necessarily like making these decisions.
Right.
He has to be the figurehead. He has to, what he was doing is what he had to do.
Yeah. What do you think of the last Iowa debate and not being in there? I mean, from the outside, it seemed like such a huge blow in terms of being taken seriously on, days before the caucus. Did you guys feel like it was a big deal, or maybe it was us outside that were making a bigger deal than we should have?
It was a big deal. Iowans take their first in the nation status seriously, especially ones that vote. And it did, I feel like it did harm us in Iowans taking Andrew seriously. Yeah. To the point where we had folks that were wanting to go to Drake University and protest. And we were like, please don't do that. This is already a blow, right? In the state that we've literally put all of our resources in. And so, yeah, it definitely, I feel like it definitely didn't help. It kind of took away credibility, like if they're looking for someone that can beat Trump as a minimum requirement, maybe be able to make the debates, right?
So if like hundreds of Yang Gang had showed up at Drake that night to kind of occupy the auditorium,
they did. A bunch did.
And let's say if more had, do you think it would have been like, wouldn't that show that, hey, this man's voice is being suppressed and people want to hear from him, and somehow he's not on the stage?
I see both sides of it. I wanted to be at that protest, but at the same time, like, word had gotten out to like Drake University themselves, and they were like, a little concerned about a scene being made. And when we were trying to be a serious campaign, and we had literally suffered this blow, they didn't want us. They kind of didn't want to look like we were a campaign of. I'm not saying that it wasn't serious. Like I said, I wanted to join it, but I saw both sides. Like the Iowa political machine is very like controlling of their process, and their first in the nation status. So hopefully they won't have that in 2024.
Seriously. Yeah, they really did one to us. The whole country, in my opinion. But after Iowa, what were you thinking? Were you thinking, oh, I'll just get in the Renegade and drive east, or what were you thinking?
Yeah, so I did. I went to New Hampshire. I took my son, and we didn't drive. It was too far. Like, I had a conversation with Andrew after Iowa that told me essentially, but not directly, that New Hampshire was make or break.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a lot of people that are like, let's go to, like South Carolina. Let's, people are wanting to, go to various states in the future. So I kind of irritated a lot of people where I'm like, no, please go to New Hampshire. But yeah, so I went to New Hampshire with my son, and I'll be honest, I didn't get a great feeling from New Hampshire. I actually had gotten a better feeling in Iowa than in New Hampshire.
What was the vibe in New Hampshire? They just didn't know about him, or just didn't like him?
I feel like in New Hampshire they did it. There was, like, they knew of him less. I can't say that I like really traversed New Hampshire and have got a real good feeling. I was just there a weekend, but it felt like, because New Hampshire was a smaller operation because we did put so much into Iowa. The people there were great, but I think that they were up against, just a lot more because we really didn't put as much resources into New Hampshire as Iowa. I mean, Andrew himself was like you said, they were like his two children. If he visited Iowa, he also had to go visit New Hampshire, So he did spend probably until like January, he did spend equal amounts of time. Mm-hmm. But there was definitely less resources in New Hampshire. And when I talk to people, they just didn't, so many people just didn't even know who he was. Yeah.
Yeah. You had a kind of bird's eye view of Yang as a leader. I'm curious, could you share a little bit about what you learned about him in terms of who he is as a human, or, his leadership style or his values that those of us who didn't have that opportunity can't pick up from, podcast interviews and things like that?
Andrew is absolutely presidential. I will say that. As a veteran, like I said, we know what the qualities of a leader are, right? This is kind of ingrained into us. It's very important. Like, leadership qualities are maybe not something that the civilian side really focuses too much on, but with my military background, he empowered people. Like, I felt empowered by Andrew to do what I was doing, right? I was empowered by him to make decisions. He stood back, right, and let you do your job. He wasn't a micromanager. I like to joke, he never threw a shoe at me or made me eat or he didn't eat his salad with a comb, or he never did anything that was psycho like that. Like, I will say I've messed up so many times right in front of him. Mm-hmm. Like, introducing him. This one time, we have signals for, when to wrap it up because Andrew's here or whatever. Mm-hmm. I messed up a signal once. I thought they said he was ready and he wasn't. So I'm like, ladies and gentlemen, your next president of the United States, Andrew. He comes running. He's like, hey, and he's heard my spiel so many times. He's like, Heidi. He's like, I thought you had so much more. I thought you were just getting started. Right. I was like, I'm sorry. I didn't get the signal. And he's just very accommodating, just very he has tact, integrity. Mm-hmm. He's just, I've done stupid things in front of him because, my brain doesn't work right a lot. And he's covered for me, right? It's an issue with there's an older gentleman who thought we were taking pictures, right, in the selfie line. Mm-hmm. And so he was in the line, he didn't give me a camera, and then he went over with Andrew and Evelyn, and he's just waiting for the picture to be taken. And I'm like, oh, he didn't give me his phone. Andrew's like, use your phone. I was like, oh.
Perfect.
And then I
Yeah.
took a picture. Like, it's just stupid stuff because you're so tired. Like, my brain's it doesn't function well as it is. I was just like frozen. Like, what do? And you're just over there, just use your phone. You know,
So did
like,
that guy ever get his picture?
yes, I sent it to him. He was a
Oh.
Republican too. He was an older gentleman who was a Republican. And he's like, I'm bringing all my Republican friends to caucus for you. So I was so glad we were, because I went and talked to him after, and he told me a story that he was this Republican who goes and listens to all the candidates. He doesn't like Democrats, right? But he does just go and listen to them all when they come into town. And he was so impressed, you know, that he got in the selfie line, and, you know.
Good for him.
So I sent him the picture and everything. But, you know, like any other, you know, like I imagine if I was working with, you know, Amy, like I probably would have paid for, you know, just like, you know, like, you know, that they're like keeping score. Like Andrew, he doesn't keep score, right? He'll help you if he can. Like I said, he's covered for me multiple times. And, you know, he knows my story too. So he knows that I'm not necessarily always in the game or, you know, on the game. And he's just he's very kind, and he's very empathetic. And like he's not someone that will like go into like an emotional like tangent, like, you know, President Trump, right? He's definitely he's got that just that even keeled, like, I've honestly never seen him like, I've seen him be a little passive aggressive, but I've never seen him like lose control of himself, right? He's very much in control of himself, and just, he's a leader. He's, you know, and sometimes he's a little naive. I will give him that, just like the whole New Hampshire with the
whipped cream.
Yeah, I don't even think that's a huge deal, but optics wise, like Zach was like, no, I know this looks bad, and it's just like, I'm like, oh shit. So sometimes he like necessarily won't see like something as being bad optics, but just in general, he's just a very kind, like, he's an amazing leader. He's the one that empowers his people to do good work.
Now, you know, if a skeptic could say, he sounds like a great guy, a great human, but to be commander in chief, you also have to make some tough calls and make people sometimes unhappy to do the right thing for the country. Do you feel like he had that in him as well, or was that still a work in development? You know? No,
I think he actually was pretty on point with that, because like I said, how many of us are over here like, get back in the race, boss, unsuspend. You know, like you look at Trump is like with the wind, like based on whatever he saw on Twitter, whatever he saw on Fox News, he's spouting off, changing his mind, doing crazy shit. Like Andrew's very much, he'll course correct as necessary, but he's not going to make any wild, crazy, emotion-based decisions, even if you want him to. Like, and also we wanted him to call out the media, right? So many times for blacking him out, but he waited, right, until he had his ducks in a row, where he had the, you know, he wasn't just gonna, because I feel like in regards to like Tulsi, a lot of people just didn't take her seriously, because she was constantly, her and her supporters were like, conspiracy. And Andrew's over here like, I can't get, you know, even though these things are happening, I have to play a bigger game, because I just won't be taken seriously if I'm constantly screaming that the sky is falling, or that I'm being, you know, even if it's true, right? So when he did it once, he did it forcefully, and, you know, they listened to him, right?
Yeah.
So he's just not someone to make decisions on impulse or emotion, and that's a good leader.
Yeah. Let me get to another question before I do that. Thank you, C. Prouse, for the super sticker. Nell has a question. In 2024, let's say Yang runs again, and he's going to have way more money and way more name recognition. And probably the country will have big problems still. Do you think at that point he should run a more traditional campaign because he will have more traditional resources? Or do you think he should kind of do, let Andrew be Andrew kind of approach?
He had to do the less traditional to get his name out there. Mm-hmm. His name is out there. He's now pretty much a household name. By 2024, I think that he will be very much a household. So he doesn't necessarily need to do the outrageous things that get attention. Because, there were a lot of things that were like, hey, we've got to do, there's, we just like, the crowd surfing and like the hologram, stuff like that. It was definitely, do outside of the box things because, to get that attention, to get noticed. He shouldn't change his policies or who he is to be traditional, because as like his platform is not traditional. But I think that he will have a better time in I'm not even sure 2024 is going to happen. Like, if you think about it, if Trump loses in 2024, like something that Jonathan Herzog, who's running for Congress in New York, in District 10, something that he said that really struck me was like, post World War I Germany, like with their the Depression and their high unemployment rate and terrible economy, like that's directly related, like directly correlates to the rise in white nationalism in Germany. So if you look at it from that perspective, like we might be in a position, like you've literally got Trump dog whistling, like he talks about the China virus, like there's one enemy, right? And then talks about like the rioters, the demonstrators as rioters, and he's dog whistling at Antifa and also Black Lives Matter, right? So he's creating like three enemies right there. And like the unemployment rate right now is, 14%? We've got 40 million people out of jobs. The United States did a serious course correction with Roosevelt's New Deal, right? I don't see anyone doing that right now. That is a massive course correction, right? Where is that massive course correction now? So in my opinion, I can't even like look at 2024 because we're not heading in a good place right now. We're looking like friggin' post World War I Germany right now.
So let's play that out. Let's say, one scenario is Trump gets reelected and it turns into, the country gets even split further apart. Wouldn't that be a great opportunity for someone like Andrew to present kind of a third way? Or why are you skeptical of Yang 2024?
I just think that, I'm not saying that Trump is the what comes from being in like a post World War I Germany era. I think what comes after Trump is like I said, it was the it like these economic conditions caused like the rise in white nationalism in Germany. Like Trump may not even be the worst iteration of this, right? 2024 might see that, right? So if you've stoked these racial flames enough, if people are, struggling, they're out of jobs. And honestly, we're going to get to a point where these jobs aren't going to come back, but because the economy is open, we're going to be like, why aren't you working to people, right? Like, we're not even going to feel sorry for them anymore. They're like the whole COVID, the whole economy's closed. We all empathize, like, the economy's open again, guys, go get a job, right? So joblessness is not necessarily going to get better. The economy, like the rich people will still be doing great. Stock market will be great. But like all of these conditions that we're not massively trying to solve, and soon we'll not even have empathy for, because you need to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Like I am not like I hope that I'm being over dramatic, but I'm just not confident that authoritarian left or right can't take over in 2024 based on what 2020 looks like. 2020 is like biblical end time shit. I'm sorry, but it's not good.
Yeah.
So,
well, what has your post-campaign life been like, coming back to civilian life in a way? How has that been for you? Because it sounded like it was pretty intense during that time you were working on the campaign. And what are you up to now?
pretty much went right into quarantine.
Yeah.
Several of us did, before Yang 2020, I was a college student, a history major. I plan to get back to that, but I'm still just very much like, I feel like my calling is something bigger than just returning to, like, it's hard to return to normal after having been part of something that you feel was bigger than yourself.
Yeah.
Just like, maybe to outsiders, we looked like this weird small group of people, but to us, it felt like we could change the world for the better. So I'm, still trying to keep the Yang Gang going. Still like see what the future looks like for this movement and kind of help steer it. Like it just doesn't feel like life goes back to normal, because we are seeing the things that, like a year ago, we were seeing these things, maybe not necessarily the pandemic, but that automation, obviously, and then wealth disparities will cause, rioting, like they may have arrested the 4 cops in the case of George Floyd, but we still have, people are still out of work. It's summer. The economy is not turning around. This is like a great season for people to be out in the streets saying, no, we have more problems that we need to fix. So I feel like I still want to be a voice and a kind of a part of that, because before all of this, like, regular life just wasn't that, like, a lot of people, I think, were very inspired and pulled out of ruts by the hope of this, this movement, essentially.
What are your thoughts on the current state of affairs in terms of the Black Lives Matter kind of criminal justice reform, all the protests and everything? What's your take on what's going on?
Well, I 100% support Black Lives Matter. I've been a supporter for many years. I met Trayvon Martin's mom several years ago. I listened to her speak, and that really, listening to her speak, and then afterwards I talked to her, and then I told her, I was like, look, I'm sorry that you had to listen to thousands of people justifying why your son had to die, right? Like, I can't imagine as a mom, listen, like, this happened to my son, and then instead of having the whole world like envelop me as a mom who lost a baby, she had to listen to people be like, well, he shouldn't have been, walking, whatever, like justifying why it would happen, or maybe he was a bad kid, or maybe somehow he deserved it. And she started crying. And like, I'm a mom, right? And I was like, oh, it was yeah, as a mom, I could not be in her shoes. I cannot imagine that. I don't think I would survive that, right? And so that really like hit me hard. And then just watching this George Floyd video was like 8 minutes, what is it? 8 minutes, 46
8
seconds.
minutes, 46 seconds, yeah.
Like Chappelle's video that came out yesterday. Like we all watched that. And there's just no way you can watch that and not be affected. And I'm sick of watching these videos, to be quite frank, right? Like, I can't imagine the PTSD that the Black community must have watching this stuff over and over again, and then also knowing it might be you. So I absolutely 100% support it. I went to Minneapolis a couple weeks ago to get a sense of, you know, what was going on. I think that the Yang Gang can be involved in, you know, we can be leaders. Like we literally have a group. I don't know if you're familiar, or do you know who McCoy is?
No.
The Melanated Council of Yang. It's literally the Yang Gang group of Black supporters, right? And I had them on my live stream after the Arbery murder, where these two white guys, one a former cop, literally shot this guy while he was out jogging. Right. Something they told me was like they had never been on any YouTube, like Yang Gang YouTube channels or live streams that before. And I was like, oh my God, we really didn't do what we needed to do for, you know, we didn't do the outreach that we needed to do. We didn't uplift the voices in the Black community that we needed to do, especially like our own, like McCoy. So now they have a YouTube channel, but like, I try and like, anything they need me to do, like amplify, whatever I am here for. It's really time to like stop kicking the can down the road in regards to this, right? Like I'm former military. I've watched so many people that I know come back and just go work for the police force, right? And I will say though that your veterans are not necessarily the ones doing the stupid shit, because veterans are trained in the military. We de-escalate, right? We're not like shoot first, ask questions later. We are de-escalate, take it down. Like we literally have like rules of war we have to abide by, right? The police don't really have that. So I'm not saying it's the veterans that are the ones that are doing it. It's usually not. It's not the veteran cops. In fact, in West Virginia, I think it was a Marine Corps, a cop who was in the Marines was fired because he didn't shoot someone, right? He's like, no, I de-escalated. I had control of the situation. And another cop showed up and shot the guy. He was having a mental health emergency. And so then they fired the cop. And it's like, no, like we should be de-escalating, not shooting people that are having mental health emergencies like this guy was, right? But so, you know, like, it's very paramilitary. The police force is like we've created all these, you know, we spent billions of dollars on these tanks and stuff like that, and then when we're done with them in Iraq and Afghanistan, what do you do with them? Oh, hey, local police force, you want them? There should never be a tank on American soil, right, against American citizens. So there's so many things that we can do to change things, and it's time.
Let me ask you this, Heidi, as a veteran, I've heard that the U.S. military is often one of the most diverse places because you've got people from all different backgrounds, all different parts of the country that, you know, they have to work together.
Yes.
And I'm curious, is that what you observe? Like, is it sort of this melting pot that we as a country want to be?
It is.
Or is it, yeah?
No,
Could
absolutely.
you share a little bit more about that?
I'm from South Louisiana. I was raised conservative, religious, Republican, very, very conservative. I voted for George Bush in 2000, right? The first year I could vote, turned 18 and then voted for George Bush. And And I joined the military in 2001, and it was the military that even exposed me to other ideas, other people. Like, I thought Democrats were the devil, right? Like, they just want to kill babies and stuff like that. And it was literally, had I stayed in Louisiana, or maybe even anywhere, if I'd done anything else with my life, I would have never been exposed to other ideas. And so by 2004, I was voting Democrat, which I don't know if that's necessarily you know, but like, I totally did a 180 on my worldview and on my beliefs and literally my political affiliation. And that was because of the military, because I was, you know, in the military, you have to build these relationships, and you can't just be like, hell no, I'm not working with a Democrat, whatever. You know, you can't do that stuff. You have to work with people of all kinds, and you have to build that trust and that camaraderie. And so, yeah, no, it totally like turned me around. Like and as a case study, my whole family, you know, back home, you know, there's still, you know, Republicans. They did like Andrew Yang though, and most of them were going to vote for him. But there's still very much that, and I'm like the black sheep now.
How do you feel about the Democratic Party? I mean, I also voted for Bush twice.
Wow.
Yeah, I was a Republican for decades.
Yeah, me too.
until 2008. But how do you feel about the Democratic Party? Because I have mixed feelings. I'm definitely very concerned about the Republican Party, but I also don't feel fantastic about the Democratic Party. I was curious how you feel about it.
I feel like everything that they are supposed to stand for, they don't anymore. Like, liberalism is in effect dead. They are as warmongering as, you know, like it was Ice-T that tweeted out like a week ago. He said Republicans and Democrats are different wings of the same bird, right? And anymore, I definitely do agree with that. Like, do I think, like I said, we need a mass course correction right now, right? Do I think Joe Biden will do that? No, I really don't. I don't think that he will take Roosevelt. Like, he's paid some lip service, but as long as they don't have to do anything, they pretty much won't. And I just don't have confidence that Joe Biden will do what needs to be done to put us back on the course we need to not fall into another depression / civil war / like total anarchy.
I liked how Steve Marchand put it. He said, well, you know, Biden will be a transitional president. That's easier for me to swallow. And I mean, obviously, I just feel like every day I watch President Trump, I feel like he's very erratic, and I don't like that in a leader. So even though Biden is no superstar, I feel like I know what I'm getting. And he will be unlikely to do crazy things.
Yes,
he may not do much. You know,
he won't do much, but that's also not solving the problems that got Trump elected.
That is true.
Right.
True.
So we return to status quo, and then what do we get in 2020? Like, he also has to do like World War II post-depression, pre-war, you know, post-depression era things. Like, Roosevelt said, like, you know, like, people didn't want to do like the New Deal. They were like, no, let's not do that. And Roosevelt's look, rich people, you either give a little or they're going to take it all. Right? Roosevelt wasn't that like progressive or liberal or
no, he was a realist.
He was a realist. He's like, we're at the point where if you don't give a little, you're going to lose it all. And I don't see anyone like taking those kind of steps right now, and I don't know that Biden will.
Well, we'll keep our fingers crossed in that. It seems like Biden and Yang have a good relationship, so hopefully he can get yanged while he's in the oval and make some good decisions. Unfortunately, we are almost out of time, Heidi. I've got another stream with Andrew Flowers, who is one of the first people who wrote an article about UBI on 538. Now he's running for Congress in Massachusetts.
Awesome.
But before we wrap up this live stream, I did want to ask you, for people who didn't know about you until now, what's the best way to sort of stay connected with you? How can they see what you're up to?
I do a lot of shit talking on Twitter. So it's at Yang Vets on Twitter. I'm the head of Veterans for Humanity as well. And we're kind of at it. We don't know what we're doing right now, obviously, because we were Veterans for Yang prior to that. But yeah, you can find me on Twitter, Yang Vets.
Awesome. And is that where to find your live streams as well?
Oh yeah, I'm also on YouTube. Veterans for actually, the Gang Saves Humanity is the name. I don't have one of those like
short.
Yeah. I don't know what I'm doing, guys. But yes, I also have a YouTube channel, The Gang Saves Humanity. The
Gang Saves Humanity, and at Yang Vets on Twitter. Heidi, thank you so much for coming. I should also point out to people that you wrote a very poignant Medium post that was very moving, and I just wanted to thank you for your service and everything you had to go through, and I wish you a great future and more contributions to the movement, because we couldn't have gotten this far without you and people like yourself who are out there on the ground. And let's just keep our powder dry for 2024. I'm ready. Are you ready?
Absolutely, yes. And thank you. Yeah. So thank you so much for having me. I feel like I made it now that I was on Nerds for.
Well, with that, we're going to say goodbye, nerds.
Goodbye, nerds.